just relaxed and paying attention.
Welcome back to 21st Century Radio with our guest, Norman D. Ellis. The book we're playing with tonight and having a great time of it is Hieroglyphic Words of Power, Symbols for Magic, Divination, and Dreamwork, published by our dear friends at Bear and Company. By the way, I'll spell her name for you just in case you need to have it. Ready? NormanDiellis.com. Okay. They got your number now, dear.
Okay.
All right. Now, how is architecture a part of the story or narrative of the gods and goddesses?
Ooh. Okay. One of the things I love about doors, let's just talk about the doors, because there are gateways into consciousness that we see in the underworld. We see them exhibited where you're going down into a tomb and you're wandering through the hours of the night, and you have to go through various hallways, and there are particular things that you must say, and beings you will meet, and messengers and guardians, and and so for me, I have begun to realize that anytime I move from one room to another, even in my house, I am entering a completely different state of consciousness, which explains entirely why I can go from one room to the next and say, why did I come in here? It's like I have to go back and figure out what I was thinking so that I can carry it forward.
I do that about 10 times a day.
Yeah. And so architecture is actually, it's like a door opening in our minds. And any types of enclosures, are containers for whatever our consciousness is. Our physical vessel is a container of consciousness, in the same way that I have a room that is my altar room where I do my readings and I do my daily meditations. And when I go in there, everything else in the rest of my house falls away. It's like I don't have a thought about the kitchen sink or the dishes, or it's just I'm focused on lighting the candles and getting the incense prepped, and it's my consciousness, my vessel, and I do my work inside there, and when I'm done I close it down and I go into another room. So the same thing happens when you're looking at an Egyptian temple. Now the temple itself is built kind of like a, I guess I'll say like a trumpet, the central part of the temple flares out so that actually the priest who is speaking in front of the shrine can be heard as if he were standing inside the trumpet and speaking out. So it like projects his voice a lot better. So that's one thing that it does. But every temple is built upon another temple in Egypt. Yeah. All temples are built with a seed stone. They call it a seed stone. And it's some stone, usually it's the phallus of the god Men, but not always. But it's some stone that they take from the previous temple and insert it into the temple that they're rebuilding as the energy connection to carry the energy from the past into that particular building. Also, the architecture is set up so that it is a reflection of as above, so below.
Oh, yes, and that's one of the first things. I'm a Rosicrucian, so that as above, so below is one of the first things that you have to deal with in understanding that. Could you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yes. Well, let's say that if you saw Egypt from a satellite and you're looking down at Egypt, you can see it very, very well now that the lights are all around the Nile, and the outskirts of the deserts are dark. but you have the image of almost like a lotus flower that's blooming in the delta opens up and you can see all the lights of it. That's a reflection of the Milky Way that is in the sky above it. Okay. That image of the goddess bending over the earth with that flower almost as being the crown on top of her head. And when you look at the Nile, you can see her breasts, you can see where her hips are. When you look at the Milky Way in the sky, you can see the body of a woman over top of this river Nile. It's very interesting. So not only that, but then every temple on the ground is connected to some constellation or some star or the sun itself, which is a star. But they are all astrologically connected, you know. So that's one of the things I think is really interesting. They will build a temple so that the light of the sun, when it rises on a solstice, will point directly at the statue the minute the sun rises, when the doors are opened, so that statue is a golden image, let's say, of Amun-Ra. And it's just brilliant, and it lights up the whole place. Or there's a starlight that comes in to point to the temple of Isis at the time that the star Deneb appears inside the womb of the sky goddess above. All right. And it illuminates the goddess Isis inside her temple. And so that's the birth of the sky goddess. Sirius, when it rises, aligns to Philae. So many of the stars, Orion, of course, I know a lot of people know about the three stars in the belt of Orion lining up to the Giza Plateau stars, all the way up to the one little pyramid on the plateau that's made of redstone, being related to the one star that's slightly offset smaller in red. I mean, down to the details. It's a mirror of the cosmos.
Now this architecture, especially of course the Great Pyramid, I don't know if I want to get into this, but I'd like to. They have now discovered new rooms in the Great Pyramid.
Yes, they have.
Isn't this exciting? Whatever you know about it, let us know.
I don't know that I know enough about it.
Oh.
I'm still wanting to go and find out more. I have a friend who went down there underneath the paw of the Sphinx.
Oh, my.
And went with Boris Said before. Yeah. You probably remember Boris Said. And so he went down there with him, and they were discovering that there were 3 layers. They used sonar to discover the 3 layers of rooms beneath the paws of the Sphinx. The second room was filled with water, so they couldn't go down to see what was in the third room because they would have, damaged it with the water. They couldn't drill down under it. But the first room was interesting. It had a moat around it, and it had like a basalt stone that almost looked like a coffin or a sarcophagus. It was very interesting, and really indicated to me that there was a lot more going on down there than we knew.
Yeah. Especially, they've generally located a massive hole, not a hole, opening. Towards the top of the Great Pyramid,
above the Davidson Chamber.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. And also, but it is very large. It is just about as long as the Grand Gallery. Now that is a very large opening near the top up there. Just as you mentioned, there are others that besides what we thought was going to be under the paw of the Sphinx, because the paw of the Sphinx, as you know, what all of the research, all of the history of Atlantis, all of the history of whatever other places that were hidden are also related to that material.
Yes.
I almost said it right. But it's every time I think about this, I get so excited because I had a lot of friends that worked out there in California on this particular, trying to locate other places in the Great Pyramid, and they came close to a number of places, but then it seemed to die away. And that's why it's so surprising now that somebody or a group of people decided, hey, let's keep on looking through various levels. And with the various kind of archaeological stuff they can do that now.
Yeah, I think the technology has allowed us to look deeper and in more directions than we were able to do by simply digging in the past, and digging, of course, tears something up. So now we're able to see it with infrared and ultraviolet and sonar, and I think that's really very exciting. Thermal, I met an Egyptologist when I was there about 4 years ago, and they had some kind of generator that was going on the north side of the pyramid, and I said, what's going on there? And he said, well, there's a cavity there, and it's generating heat, and we don't know why.
Oh.
So I was like, well, I wonder if he ever found that.
Sure.
So, yeah, and it was just one little clue. I never met the man again. I never heard anything about that. But I love the stories and the mystery. And I just, I want to keep going back to see what there is to see, because I don't think we'll ever tap all of it, ever.
Well, you're probably right. And now you don't have to deal with, I don't want to offend you or anything, but one guy that always caused us some difficulty was Zaki Hawass.
Yeah.
I mean, the trouble he gave to a number of researchers was unbelievable.
I think that's true. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're finding more and more people finding things on the plateau, because he's no longer in charge of all of the curators of museums and the archaeologists. They are allowed to do their research, and there's some really good young archaeologists that are working there, and they don't have to answer to Zahi.
Thank heavens. Jeez, a whiz. One major research group after another had to literally be controlled as to what they did and how they did it. And therefore, it wasted a lot of money, a lot of time, and he got away with it.
Yep.
And I'm glad they caught him eventually. That kind of thing. Now, we got to take a break. Is that true, Kortner? Dr. Kortner says we got to take a break, and I can't break the law. It's Rules and Regulations 506 of the Penal Code, and she is tough. All right, we'll be back with our guest, Norman D. Ellis, Hieroglyphic Words of Power, Symbols for Magic, Divination, and Dreamwork, Bear and Company. NormanDEllis.com. This show will be an escape for you, a time for you to revel in the world of imagination and communicate with your higher self. But first, we do want to acknowledge the unusual situation we all find ourselves in called a worldwide pandemic. Of course, we want you to wash your hands and follow CDC guidelines for hygiene, as you should through any flu season. But also envision yourself as healthy and whole. This is a key factor in your well-being. In order to see yourself radiantly healthy, you should regularly turn off the news and social media and their steady stream of fear and negative imagery. Pray, meditate, serve, do yourself well. Now on with the show.
Hello, this is Robert Boval. I'm the author of The Orion Mystery and Message of the Space. And you're listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Bob Hieronymus as your host. May the quest go on.
Yeah, the quest is going on. Robert Boval, thank you for joining us so many times. We really appreciated it. And you have accomplished so much over the years. Normandy, are you with us?
I'm here.
Okay. Now, how did you come up with the 9 interpretations for each of the 60 glyphs?
Well, I love numerology, and I love the idea that Pythagoras spent his 30 years in Egypt wandering about the temples, pestering the priests, saying, "What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean?"
Yeah.
And the priests, of course, because he was not one of them, he was an outsider, they sent him to the next temple on down the river. And he went there for 30 years. And finally, the Pharaoh sends a letter to the priests at Hermopolis and says, "Teach this guy what he wants to know." And so that was Pythagoras.
Yeah.
And from that, we get the Pythagorean theorem that we all have to learn in high school. And he was also, he said, everything is number. All is number.
All is number, yeah.
And so the numbers 1 to 9, I teach numerology, and so the numbers 1 to 9, there are 9 meanings for each one of the cards. And how I came up with them, I believe that was the question you asked me,
That's correct.
That I worked with Spirit to give me the answer to what the interpretations were for these particular 9 meanings for one image. So, yeah. And so I went into a meditation and received the information that way.
So you got some help from the inside.
Yeah, I think so.
It's always good to get stuff on the inside. Well, I was amazed at how you were able to do that. With, I'd like to give an example here, if I could find the right pages, on the multiple interpretations that I just found that amazing in there. But I'm not going to be able to find that right away, so I better not even try to worry about it. Now, could you give us, for instance, as to how hieroglyphs show up in in dreams? No, we talked about that, didn't we?
Yeah, we did a little bit. We talked about how they show up in dreams.
You want to talk some more about that?
Well, let's see. I would say that some of the people that we that are inhabiting our dreams, okay, they're ancient Egyptian spiritual bodies. There are 9. There we go with our number 9 again. There are 9 ancient Egyptian spiritual bodies. We talked about the Ba, which shows up in dreams. We talked about how it is the human-headed hawk. But then there are these 2 in particular, because they're so close to the lower astral plane, the dark shadow and the light shadow. And everybody has that kind of dark shadow that shows up in the dream, the boogeyman feature, if you will. And usually it is it can be a part of our own psyche that we haven't dealt with yet, or it could be an energetic signature of someone who has crossed over, but not sufficiently crossed over, has not completely crossed over, and is still attached to a human realm. We'll see them in dream time. But we also see light shadows. So, and those can be almost like angelic figures or ascended masters. Those who have gone on to the other side, but come down into our consciousness in order to provide us with information, and they're messengers in spirit, so some are usurpers of energy and others are messengers in spirit. And they're, the Egyptians categorized them, the 72 shadows in the underworld that show up in our dreams. I like one of them. There was one that his image is written on the wall in Thutmose III's tomb. And it's this image of a man, and his head is floating above his neck. And they're all named. And this guy's name is He Whose Head is on Too High.
Oh.
And I thought, yeah, I've met some of those people at the water cooler. Oh, wait, maybe it was me.
Well, no, never, no.
But yeah, so those people, the peoples of our dream, the hieroglyphs would tell us about who they are. And you would, if you studied the hieroglyphs, would know the names of these individuals. And the point is to be able to identify them and say, I know you, I know your name. If you can name the thing that frightens you, you have control over it. That's something the dreams teach us.
I have a very important question that I must ask
All right.
you. Tell us about the Akashic records that travel with us when we pass to spirit.
Okay, the first thing that I'll tell you about the Akashic records is that the most important thing that's in your record is what you're writing right now. So a lot of people want to know who they were in the past, as if that could explain who they are now. I'm going to say, this is what they have told me, that there is a purpose for our forgetfulness, so that we can look at the problem head on and do something different, not rely on the same thing that we did before. Not lay the blame at, oh, I'm this way because so-and-so was that way, and so now I'm this way this time. Mm-hmm. No, it doesn't have anything to do with that. It has to do with how your own soul is going to grow given the conflict that you have. You're not going to grow if you don't have any conflict in your life. And so your Akashic record is not always going to be easy. Mm-hmm. It's going to be let me try explaining it a different way. With a dream I had, okay? Is that all right?
Of course it's all right.
So I had this dream that I was standing around a vessel. Some people would call it a cauldron, but I was with angels, so I'll just call it a vessel. And it was kind of gelatinous, and it had these plates floating on it, on the top of the surface. And each of these plates had a constellation, or it had a planet. And I was looking at an astrological chart, and it was moving around back and forth, and I was helping these angels put the plates in exactly the right pattern. And as an astrologer, I'm watching the pattern and I go, ooh, that's a really interesting pattern. And one of the angels goes, okay, jump in. So that is how we choose our destiny. And it is not, a sequential who I was in a past life might be who you are in a future life. And now you're living in the past. I mean, time is not, it's malleable, I'm going to go back to that bird that fishes the river, can go upstream or downstream to get whatever juicy piece he needs to get filled up, mm-hmm. with spirit. So I think that Akashic records can teach us connections to other people. They can show us things that we need to, lessons that we need to do again. They don't usually tell us all the good stuff we did. If somebody tells you you were the queen of something, I would be suspicious.
Well, I thought you weren't
No.
No, for
no.
God's sake.
I'm not the queen of anything.
Why am I talking to you? I'm sorry, but I used to hear that from so many people. There are too many queens out there.
There are, and too many Cleopatras, and I, someone will tell me, well, I was Cleopatra, and I'll go, well, which one? Because there were a lot of them.
Well, there's so many great things in this book, and I'm not touching on a lot of them, such as, I know you've read part of Red Book, Carl Jung's Red Book, right?
Oh, yeah. I got it on my desk right here.
Well, I got a copy of it it's too big for my desk, but it's his work was just so extraordinary, and I often wondered many times what he's not telling us.
Oh yeah.
And he kept quiet about something, or else they could have. The establishment, let's put it that way, would have taken him down, no matter how great he was, if they had known some of the other things that he was doing. You see his artwork; it's so brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, it is brilliant.
And it's more or less that, and I love a lot of the stories that he would tell. But then, and also in your book, you talk about something which I never heard anyone talk about, and that is, what is the secret life of inanimate objects?
Oh, I love that book.
Well, I'd love to get a copy of that book, because I have been growing. You know, we're all growing, but I have these every now and then lumps of growth, and one of the beginning of those lumps of growth was when I became conscious of the fact that that stones have consciousness.
Yes.
And when I experienced that, I didn't feel like I could tell anybody except my wife and other friends, because I thought that for sure they were going to say, you're crazy. Stones can't think. Well, maybe they don't think the way we do, but they're a lot more. Everything is alive.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about this inanimate object, how you got into this?
Well, I actually got into that book because I attended a workshop with Jean Houston.
Oh, wow, Jean.
She referred me to that book. And I loved it because for me it explained why certain objects like those books that were in the closet were vibrating.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it explained why that there was consciousness inside those books, and it was trying to get my attention. You know,
sure.
When I was married to the husband who told me he thought that, you know, I should throw the book away. I don't know why he said that, because he was very psychic himself, and we would lie in bed at night, and there was a picture on the wall of I forget what they call them. She was one of those. She was the Gibson girl, Evelyn Nesbit. That was the portrait on the wall.
Well, I'll be. Geez, the Gibson girl.
You know, beautiful hubba hubba girls back in the 20s. But anyway, he had this picture of her because he thought she was brilliant. And we would lie in bed and look at that picture and watch her mouth move. And she would wink at us, and then she got very animated, and the picture would start talking.
Oh,
you know,
wow.
it was like, wow. And I'd lie in bed and I'd be looking at it, and I'd say, "Did you see that?" And he'd say, "Yeah, it looked like she said," and I was like, "Yeah, it did." You know, so that was my first discovery, and then I discovered the book. You know, The Secret Life of Animate Objects. And I think that picture had a certain amount of energy because the two of us were very fascinated with that picture. It happened to be the picture that would look over our bed in the room, you know. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Go figure. It was kind of interesting. I have had objects move around in my house. I have, you know, a lot of people talk about apports. Spiritualists talk about apports a lot, mm-hmm. where people will sit in meditation and ectoplasm gathers in the room, and you can actually physically see this viscous fluid. You know, sometimes it's blue light and sometimes it's more a yellow, and the ectoplasm will generate objects in the room. Rose petals will fall into people's laps, you know, while they're sitting in the dark, and no one is moved. So there's a consciousness, you know. You walk into the room after the seance is over, and you realize that the roses that were in that room have no petals on them anymore. Mm-hmm. So it's like the petals migrated somehow through the atmosphere and took their residence in the sitter's laps. It's very interesting.
Well, there are so many wondrous things in life that are so mysterious that it takes a long time for us to... Oops. Boss lady says we got to take a break. And I got to pay attention to that. Rules and regulations. We are taking a final break. Is this the final break? Well, at least this is the final break. With our guest, Normandy Ellis. I wish we had another 2 hours. Hieroglyphic words of power, symbols for magic, divination, and dreamwork, Bear and Company. You should get a couple of copies of this book, friend. You really will love it. We'll be right back.
I'm John Anthony West, author of Serpent in the Sky, High Wisdom of Ancient Egypt, and the leader of Magical Egypt Tours to Egypt. You're listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Bob Hieronymus.
Brother John. Goodness gracious, I certainly miss him. I think the whole planet misses him. Our guest right now is Normandy Ellis, Hieroglyphic Words of Power, Symbols for Magic, Divination, and Dreamwork, Bear and Company. And you can reach her at NORMANDIELLIS.com. Okay, are you with us?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, well, we hardly have any time, and I've got 22 questions here. So I'm going to get to this one. How is the dung beetle the symbol par excellence of alchemy?
I'm so glad you asked that question.
Me too. I am too.
So the dung beetle, it turns out, is rolls its eggs inside a ball of cow manure, and it buries it into the ground, and it stays in the ground for I think 28 days. It's the same as the cycle of a moon. You know, dung beetles wander around and do their thing based upon where the moon is and the phases of the moon. So the dung beetle rolls his little eggs up inside a ball of cow manure and drops it in the ground, and then digs it back up 28 days later, and the ball is hard because it's been in the sand and it's kind of cooked, and it pops open and all these golden winged beetles fly out of it. And they fly up in the air toward the sun as a symbol of resurrection. So that was why you always found that symbol of the winged dung beetle, the winged scarab, on the chest of most of the mummies. It was a sign of resurrection. Now, the alchemy part of it has to do with the fact that it takes its base matter, we're going to call the base matter of the cow dung, which would be the equivalent of thinking about turning lead into gold. You're turning cow manure into light. You know, turning something in your life that's a negative, something in your life that is hurtful, painful, and working it spiritually and pulling it through your process so that it becomes the thing that actually elevates you to something else. People, let's say, who have psychologically experienced drug addiction and go through that process of AA where they have to, you know, make amends for everything that they've done and give over to a higher power. And that's an alchemical process. And they turn into golden ones when they become an addictions counselor, let's say, you know. So the alchemical symbol is a personal process. And the dung beetle is how to turn anything in your life that's a negative into a positive.
That's the great thing about alchemy, of taking something that isn't so positive and making it gold. But there were a few people that I've read before that did somehow turn silver into gold. But that's something else altogether. Now, what are the gifts of Anubis?
Anubis is a wonderful healer. He is also a great listener. Anubis is a wonderful psychotherapist, actually. If you if you sit in meditation and you talk with Anubis, I mean, what can I say? He's all ears, you know. He he really is.
You've got to go in there. I'll have to
Yeah.
remember that one. He's
And
all ears.
and he's a great, that's why he's such a great healer, because he hears everything and he doesn't forget any of it. And he has a nose for what you're not saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so when you do your meditations and you work with Anubis, he looks you right in the eye, and he doesn't let go. His gaze does not let go of you. If you've ever looked at that statue that's inside the museum in Tutankhamun's chamber, where you see Anubis, with
Mm-hmm.
he's got his like paws stretched out, and you can see his toenails, his golden toenails, and he's just looking you right in the eye. You can go all the way around the room, and he doesn't stop looking at you. He knows exactly where you are. I think that's a good quality to have with one who is going to be weighing your heart in the underworld. He
Mm-hmm.
knows,
Mm-hmm.
he puts your heart in the scale, and he can tell you before he even puts it on the scale whether it's going to be light as a feather. So, and it better be.
Yeah, it better be. Now, oh gosh, this is such a good question from the perspective of what I need to learn. How is light the basic foundation of the universe?
Because it is. The light seed, the light source, is consciousness itself. Everything, when we think about the Big Bang, and it all started from this Big Bang, that's the expression of light. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And all of us, all the gods and the goddesses, all humans, all animals, all plants, all planets, all things that we even don't even know about yet. But when we see them, we go, oh yeah, there's that. People from other universes. There's something that's all quanta, which is the light. It's quanta is the tiniest particle of essence. There's like millions and millions of quanta underneath one cell in your fingernail, But what quantum mechanics and quantum entanglement tells us is that anything that's ever been part of something else and has blown apart like it did inside the Big Bang, if it has ever been part of something else, it remains connected to it. There's a correlation between it. And so there is a relationship. So if you think, let's say you think that the entities of the divine beings, let's call them angels, if you think that works for a description, but anything and humans are connected to each other. We're connected to the gods and the goddesses because we all started with that spark. They're doing something different. They're not in the physical, but that doesn't mean that they don't have a correlation to us, and that their consciousness is not part of our consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's why it's all light. It's all quanta.
All quanta, and as a matter of fact, it leads right into the... I hope we have enough time for this question. Tell us about your book, Feasts of Light. I got to get a copy of this book, Feasts of Light.
Feasts of Light is a book in which I decided I wanted to figure out how the sacred calendar in ancient Egypt worked. And it is, again, a lot of it is connected to when a particular star rises, or when a particular solar event happens, or something like that, or when a certain moon day is. And so it follows the images of all of the temples that I could find what their feast days were, according to, the rising of a particular fixed star, for example, or the sun. And for example, we'll have December the 21st is called the Night of the Mother. And that's when the great sky goddess births the sun again. She births Ra, or sometimes Horus. Isis births Horus, or Nut births Ra. But it is the story of how that happens that's retold in a particular temple for that particular time of year. Now, Sirius, we just had Sirius rise. July the 4th this year. It used to be July 19th in Egypt, but, our calendar and our galaxy is drifting. So it was July the 4th, and Sirius rose, and that's the beginning of the Egyptian New Year. That's the start of the festival calendar.
I want to move, in the limited time we got, I want to move in the direction of, is there a direct link to the Hebrew people who carried forward Akhenaten's idea on monotheism?
I believe that there is. I believe that when you climb up through the layers of time that are embedded inside the island of Elephantine, you climb up to the top where you see a beautiful temple that was built. It's now been toppled, but it was built by Hatshepsut of rosy quartz. And some of the gateways are still there. They're like stargates. But as you stand at the top of that, the very top of that island, and you look down, you're looking down into a Jewish bakery.
Oh.
And then there's a whole Jewish city. You can see where the mayor lives. So you realize that the Jewish people and through layers of time, the Jewish people and the Egyptian people were living side by side. There's even a temple that is a duplicate temple. There's the god Khnum in the Egyptian tradition who creates the soul out of clay, and his Ba, and you and your Ba are created on his potter's wheel, and he's attended by a goddess named Satis. Her name means, she's the goddess of the flood. Her name means enough, like to be satisfied. So then next to that, on the other side of the island, there's a temple that's dedicated to Yahweh, who's making people out of clay. And he has the Shekinah with him in this particular temple. So it's very interesting to me to see how these two cultures were living side by side at one time. And of course, the flood had covered everything up, and then the people left, and then, there was a diaspora, and a forgetting, but there was a connection there. The fact that the languages both do not use vowels, because the vowel is the breath and it's sacred, and the stories of the creation are very similar.
This may be our final question. The 42 Negative Confessions of the Ancient Egyptians offers an ethical code that includes social, personal, and planetary prohibitions, protectiveness, etc. What were the 42 negative prohibitions? You got 2 minutes.
I got 2 minutes. Well, I can't tell you all 42, but I can tell you that they're very similar to the 10 Commandments, with one exception. Thou shalt have no other God but me. The importance is honor all the gods, okay? Because everything is alive, and everything is God spark, and everything is God consciousness. So you better honor all of it. That's one of the negative confessions. I have not denied a God his due, I guess would be one way of saying that. So, and if the other thing is that I want to speak to the environmental aspect of it, because one of the most important things was to not take advantage of the natural world, because it was, as we said, a guarded world. You did not dam the river. That's one of the confessions. I have not dammed the river. Why did you not dam the river? Because the river was the god happy. If you had dammed it, you would be trying to prevent the god from doing that which he is supposed to do, which is to flood the entire land and fill it with energy, with really rich silt land, so that crops will grow. And even if you dammed a little piece of it so that more of that silt came to your land, it took it away from your neighbor's land, and that was considered stealing. And so damming the river was trying to change the course of how the world was supposed to work.
And that's what we got to do right now, dam the river and full speed ahead, because we are out of time. Oh, Normandy, this has been a lot of fun, and I hope we can talk with you again in the future.